Good afternoon. I'm Bucks County District Attorney Matt Weintraub. Today, I have this actually entitled "The Power of Persistence and Sheer Force of Will in Search of the Truth and for Justice." Joy Hibbs was 35 years old when she was murdered 31 years ago on April the 19th of 1991. Today, Robert Atkins was arrested for her murder and is being held without bail at Bucks County Prison. Atkins, for the past 31 years, has been living free but on borrowed time. Today, we start to collect on that time from him with interest. A mother of two, happily married, Joy Hibbs was described as kind, gentle, and someone who loved her family immensely. She was the perfect mother and wife. Her 12-year-old son came home that day on April 19th of 1991 from elementary school about 1:05 p.m. to find smoke coming from his home at 1200 Spencer Drive in Croydon in Bristol Township. He tried to get into the house through the kitchen, but he couldn't because of the fire and the smoke. He ran to the neighbors for help, knowing that his mother was at home. After the fire was put out, Joy Hibbs was discovered dead in her son's bedroom. She was stabbed repeatedly. She had fractured ribs and was likely asphyxiated. Her autopsy indicated there was no smoke in her lungs, indicated that she had been murdered prior to the fire being set. An investigation at that time determined that she had cashed her paycheck just hours before she was killed, but that money was never located. An investigative timeline determined that Joy was likely murdered between 11:50 a.m. and 12:50 p.m., a 1-hour time window. Witnesses reported seeing a blue Chevy Monte Carlo parked haphazardly outside the Hibbs house around 12:30 p.m. that day and saw it there until about 1 p.m. Robert F. Atkins, our defendant, who owned a blue Chevy Monte Carlo, quickly became a person of interest in Joy Hibbs' murder. Atkins used to live 2 doors down from Joy Hibbs and her family, and occasionally was known to have sold marijuana to them in the past. Our investigation revealed that the defendant and Ms. Hibbs had had a recent dispute over the quality of the marijuana. This was many, many years ago. The investigation revealed that. After the murder, Atkins gathered his wife and their 2 children and immediately left for an unplanned trip to the Poconos, returning 2 days later, thus attempting to create a built-in alibi. Over the past 3 decades, Robert Atkins has always remained a person of interest in Joy Hibbs' murder. And I give credit to her family, and I'm sure every family who has suffered a murder, an unsolved murder in their family would feel the same. They never gave up hope on solving this murder. I also have to give a lion's share of the credit to Sergeant Michael Slaughter of the Bristol Township Police Department, who breathed fresh life into this investigation. And that ball was then carried by Bucks County Detective David Hanks and Bucks County First Assistant District Attorney Jennifer Shorn, who, despite the passage of time and great odds, persisted, and through sheer force of will and the utilization of a very special tool, the power and the resources of the Bucks County Grand Jury, were finally able to solve Joy Hibbs' murder. A little background on that. This case was submitted to the Bucks County investigating grand jury as soon as one was in panel this year, January of 2022. This grand jury heard from numerous witnesses, including the defendant's ex-wife, April Atkins. She told the grand jury, among other things, that in the early afternoon of April the 19th of 1991, the day of Joy Hibbs' murder, Robert Atkins came home covered in blood. She said Robert Atkins told her that he stabbed someone and lit their house on fire. She said that he put his bloody clothes in the wash and showered. He then told her to call out of work and gathered the kids because they were taking a trip to the Poconos. She didn't know if it was Joy who was killed until they got back from the Poconos 2 days after the murder. She had previously, on many other occasions, denied knowing anything about the murder because she feared for her own safety. She feared her husband, Robert Atkins, with good reason. After being presented with additional evidence corroborating April Atkins' critical testimony to them, the Bucks County investigating grand jury concluded that Atkins, Robert Atkins, murdered Joy Hibbs on April 19th, 1991, took the money from her, and intentionally set their family home on fire in an attempt to cover up her murder. Because of the investigation that occurred and the information that they uncovered, the grand jury recommended Atkins, 56, of Falls Township, be charged with first-degree murder, second-degree murder, 2 counts of arson, and 2 counts of robbery. These charges carry the possibility of a life sentence and possibly even the death penalty. But those determinations will be made by my team and me at a later time. Atkins surrendered this morning and was arraigned by Judge Peranteau down in Bristol Borough and was remanded to Bucks County Prison without bail. What are some of the takeaways here? The power of the Bucks County Grand Jury, the power of Bucks County citizens to make sure that no murder goes unsolved forever. Give them credit. These are ordinary citizens, men and women just like you and me, that sacrifice on a weekly basis so that they can help us solve these horrible crimes. As I said earlier, I give complete credit to the power of persistence and sheer force of will. These things do not happen by accident. They do not happen as a matter of coincidence. There is no magic to it. It is hard, painstaking work on behalf of the entire team arrayed behind me. And I guess the message to the public, to the police, if you're watching this, and I hope I do sound like a broken record, bring us your cold case murders. Everyone matters. No cold case should remain unsolved. And to the public, bring us your tips on unsolved crimes, on cold case murders. So if you have any information on this case or any other cold case homicide, please contact us at 215-345-6354 or at bucksda.com. And I think this is probably the most important takeaway today. If you suffer, if you are the victim of a crime, never give up hope. Joy Hibbs' husband, daughter, and son never did, even after decades. And now we are very close, so close, to holding her killer, Robert Atkins, criminally responsible for her murder. In anticipation of today, the Hibbs family submitted a statement that they asked me to read to you. So although my name is mentioned in this statement, please accept it as coming from the Hibbs' family. This is from Charlie Hibbs, Joy's husband, and her 2 children, Angie and David. Joy Hibbs was a sweet, charming Southern girl from Central Florida, a loving and devoted mother, wife, and medical assistant. She was highly regarded and loved by her friends, neighbors, and co-workers alike. On April 19, 1991, she was brutally murdered in her own home in broad daylight, stabbed 5 times in the chest and neck and strangled with an electrical cord. Her body and our family home were intentionally set on fire in an attempt to make this horrific crime disappear. The immense grief and suffering our family has endured over the last 3 decades will never disappear. For 31 years, our family has been haunted by this tragic loss, knowing without a doubt that Robert Atkins was the perpetrator. Our family has waited 31 years for justice to prevail. We would like to thank District Attorney Matt Weintraub and Chief Deputy DA Jennifer Shorn and Detective David Hanks for pursuing this case. We especially want to thank Detective Michael Slaughter of the Bristol Township Police Department for his tireless effort in investigating this case and seeking justice for our family. We are grateful for the outpouring of love and support from the community and ask that you respect our privacy during this difficult time. So that's the end of the statement. That's the end of my remarks. I'll try to answer some questions that I'm sure you may have.
Matt, the president mentions, and you alluded to this just now, that April Atkins gave a statement in 2014 and also again in 2016. In 2016, she seemed to implicate her husband almost directly. I know this is a complicated case, but can you explain why it took from 2016 till last year for this to sort of start in motion if you had a statement sort of directly implicating Atkins?
Well, what I could say for certain is that there is no great reason, no specific reason, Vinny. But what I want people to understand is cases that we have many cases, some that are unsolved, and some tend to take priorities over others. April Atkins standing alone would be a difficult witness to pin this entire prosecution on. So when we had the resources and the time and the energy and the manpower and the access to the grand jury, it all came together very quickly. But I also will give credit to the Hibbs' family and to outside media sources who shone a light on this case and really brought a lot of sunlight to bear on it so that it all coalesced in 2022. So there's no perfect answer as to why we didn't pursue this in 2016, but we're here now and I'm grateful for that.
But if Mrs. April hadn't come forward, if she hadn't said what she knew and escaped that fear, would we be here?
I don't think so. There's no magic to this. The case largely relies on her statements and anticipated testimony. No case is perfect. I would also add that we made a conscious decision to say this case is not perfect, but we know we have enough to go forward to achieve a conviction against Robert Atkins. And if not now, when? And if not us, who?
Matt, it's mentioned in the presentment that Robert Atkins, at the time of the murder, was a confidential informant for Bristol Township Police. And it seems to insinuate that maybe his alibi checked out thoroughly at the time?
That's a fair question, Joe. I would say that his alibi, we don't accept his alibi as credible. Perhaps other people that were situated differently back then accepted his alibi and maybe didn't look under every rock as thoroughly as we have now. Mm-hmm. I can't substitute my judgment for them, and I certainly do not know the motivations behind that. But we believe that his alibi can be discounted beyond a reasonable doubt, and that's why we're here today. Anybody else?
Do you think this evidence in recent years has always been there, or as more information has come in that's helped build the case, or at that time, if they would have looked more in depth, do you think that could have solved the case sooner?
I think that it takes a certain set of skills to be able to put a case like this together, Tom. I'm not saying that they lacked those skills back then, but it takes an awful lot of willpower and concentration to see disparate pieces to a puzzle that don't obviously all come together and to take a chance on a prosecution because the family deserves that. So there must be a reason why we weren't here for the past 31 years, but I can't say what that is. All I can tell you is we're here now.
Fair to say Mrs. Atkins is not going to face any charges for bowling evidence or not speaking out earlier?
Correct. These are all the charges that we anticipate being filed and only against Robert Atkins. Correct.
Can the chief of Bristol Township speak to whether or not confidential informants are handled differently now than they were in 1991?
I can't speak. In 1991, I was at another agency as
Sure.
a detective sergeant in New Jersey at the time. But I assure you, not knowing the history back in 1991, that confidential informants, would not be handled, in that they wouldn't be, and no crimes would be exonerated because they were confidential
Sure.
informant.
Anybody else?
Can you describe Atkins' reaction when he was arrested?
He knew it was coming. He voluntarily turned himself in, so he was not surprised. The grand jury is a powerful thing. I don't think he was surprised that this was coming.
It appeared he knew the walls were closing in, the truth was coming out.
Certainly.
You made preparations for that?
I can only say I would get ready, but I don't know what.
In the PCA, he made preparations for his son in the future.
Yeah, I'll let you read through that in the PC, Deanna. I understand what you're alluding to. But certainly every little piece to the puzzle that forms the clearest, most transparent picture is important so that when we present this to a fact finder, they're going to hear about that as well. Anybody else?
Is there anything you'd like to say directly to the Hibbs family?
I have met them on a couple of occasions. Their pain and their anguish is real, and it has been compounded by years and years of no answers. Today is a gratifying day. I'm glad that we were able to have this day to celebrate, but we have much more work to do, and we will not let you down. All right, thank you all. Appreciate it.